and unmovable. That red arrow with 3-2 next to it, the 32nd, was piercing the German line. It just became the Red Arrow Division because it was always piercing the German line.
By this time, September 1918, Colonel Westnedge's 126th Infantry had been reduced to less than 1/2 of its men and 1/3 of its officers due to casualties and sickness. After its relief from the Jevigny campaign, the 32nd Division was sent to a rest area where 5,000 replacements were received. Most of them were draftees. Some had been inducted only 2 months earlier, and after just 2 weeks of drilling, they prepared to return to the battle. Since joining the war in Europe, one of the goals of General Pershing, the U.S. Commander-in-Chief, had been to establish an American army having its own identity and theater of operation independent of the other allies. President Wilson agreed that this would give the United States a stronger position in any post-war negotiations. However, the same press of battle which had forced Pershing to give up his early plan to use the 32nd Division as replacement troops had, till now, forced him to integrate his divisions into the French and British armies. But in the fall of 1918, with the Germans regrouping, the opportunity presented itself for the American forces to be brought together and begin an independent assault. Pershing met with Allied Commander Field Marshal Foch, and the two agreed the Americans would attack in an area known as the Argonne Forest. This would be the largest American effort in the war and the most costly. Over 1 million American soldiers would be involved, and unlike those in the 126th Infantry, most would be inexperienced. The battle would last until the end of the war and leave over 26,000 Americans dead and almost 100,000 wounded. Colonel Westnedge and the 126th Infantry were to play a key role. The Argonne Forest was a heavily wooded area marked by rugged heights and ridges. After 4 years of fighting, the Germans had built an extensive defensive system of unusual depth and strength. Their fortified lines ran along the heights, with the most formidable of these being known as the Kriemhilde Stellung, or the Hindenburg Line. General Pershing planned a massive American assault on the woods with an ambitious timetable that called for the Hindenburg Line to be overrun on the second day. The attack was to rely on surprise and speed. But despite some significant gains on the first day, the huge American army quickly became bogged down. The few supply roads became jammed with men, horses, guns, trucks, and wagons. The Germans put up a stiff resistance, and inexperienced American units at the front became lost and disorganized. After 10 days, a stalemate developed, and the Hindenburg Line remained unbroken. General Pershing arranged for the frontline troops to be relieved. Colonel Westnedge and the 126th Infantry found themselves heading on to their fourth and final battleground.
Some National Guard divisions had better reputations than others, and the 32nd, made up of Michigan and Wisconsin National Guard troops, was known as a power division. It was a very reliable and very successful division in terms of its participation, and the 32nd then was thrown into, on several occasions, into areas that, because of that reputation, that if given a task, an assigned task, they would carry it out, and they did it too.
The 32nd Division passed through this woods in a cold downpour of rain, in the darkest night that I have ever seen, or rather felt, at a time when the only trail through no man's land was completely blocked, so that the men with their 75-pound packs, had to pick their way over tangled wire, in mud, and under the fire of the enemy's artillery. Yet, there were no complaints. General Hahn.
These woods had been subjected to considerable shelling. Shell holes appeared in all directions, and many trees were shattered, leaving only stumps of what was once full-grown oaks and maple trees. These woods had been drenched with gas, much of which in liquid form was still standing in shell holes. The odor from human corpses filled the woods. Captain Gonzer.
Gas shells came over, and all hell had let loose. We put on our mask and wore them about a half an hour. I was sick as hell, and that gas mask didn't make me feel any better. After a while, we took them off. And then they started shelling again. Charles Bennett, bugler.
They started the gas over us. Several other boys and myself got enough gas to last us the rest of our lives. After one got his senses back, a dizzy and nauseated feeling seems to come. The eyes become bloodshot, and there's a most painful coughing. Captain Otto K. Booter of Kalamazoo.
From October 4th through the 13th, a series of unsuccessful attacks were made against the German line. General Pershing believed the key position in the Hindenburg Line was the Côte d'Armorié, a fortified crescent-shaped ridge with a prominent hill at each tip. He planned for an early morning attack on October 14th in which the 5th and 42nd Divisions would assault opposite ends of the ridge. In order to deceive the German defenders, he ordered the 32nd Division as a decoy to attack 3 hours earlier in the center of the ridge. General Hahn, Colonel Westnedge, and the men of the 32nd Division did not know that they were supposed to be the bait for the trap. Their orders were to take the ridge.
I felt that it would be necessary to raise the morale of our troops to the very highest pitch, to make them believe that not only must the position be taken, but we would take it, that nothing in front of them would stop them. General Hahn.
Colonel Westnedge came to me when we were securely placed in our positions. In his characteristic way, he said, "Everything is set." That was his moment of prayer, and he consecrated the regiment to the will of the Infinite Father. Chaplain Donegan.
On October 14th, 1918, at 5:30 a.m., with the 127th on their left and the 128th on their right, the 126th Infantry went over the top against center Côte d'Armorié as ordered. They were met by heavy machine gun fire at the edge of the enemy's barbed wire entangle.
The boys fell on all sides of me, and I almost went crazy with madness. But we went on, and not even hell could have stopped us. Private Bernard Williams.
Gradually came reports from various parts of the front. A message was received that the 127th Infantry had gone against heavy fire in the woods and was stopped. Then another message. The 128th was also held up. General Hahn.
Meanwhile, with the German forces engaged in the center, the 5th and 42nd Divisions launched their attack as planned. However, the envisioned pincer-like movement proved too difficult to execute, and all three divisions soon found themselves pinned down by heavy fire directed at them from the fortified heights of the Côte d'Armorié. What changed the course of battle was an act of desperation. Colonel Westnedge, after several attempts to get the 126th Infantry through a gap in the wire, sent Captain Edward Strom and 7 men forward to take the machine guns which covered the gap. Under heavy fire, The patrol worked their way up the steep slope until they were within